Be me, Oscar. Just another code monkey in the corporate zoo. For the last few years, my life has been pretty simple. Get up, commute, sit in a reasonably comfortable chair for 8 hours, write code, solve problems, go home. The pay is decent, the work is challenging enough to not be boring, but not so challenging that I lose my hair over it. Our team, the engineering department, is the engine of the whole company. We're the guys tucked away in a corner of the office, fueled by coffee and the quiet satisfaction of making things work. Nobody really bothers us because nobody really understands what we do. They just know that if we stop doing it, their paychecks stop appearing. It's a good arrangement. The team is solid, a dozen or so guys. There's Josiah, the department lead. He's been with the company since the Stone Age. He's forgotten more about our legacy systems than the rest of us will ever know. He's a quiet guy, communicates in grunts and concise emails. But if you have a real problem, he's the one you go to. Then there's Emmanuel, the youngest on the team. Fresh out of college, super smart, but still has that deer in the headlights look. Eager to please, terrified of making a mistake. The rest of us are somewhere in between, competent, professional. We just want to do our jobs and be left alone. We have a good rhythm. We joke around on our private chat server. We complain about stupid management decisions. We help each other out. It's a functional brotherhood of nerds. The rest of the office is different. Marketing, sales, HR. They exist in a world of meetings, buzzwords, and colorful PowerPoint presentations. We build the car. They argue about what color to paint it. We mostly ignored them, and they mostly ignored us. A perfect symbiosis. This peaceful ecosystem was thrown into chaos a few months ago. We got an all-hands email announcing our new director of human resources. Her name was Mina. The email had a picture of her. Professional headshot, sharp blazer, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The bio underneath was a masterclass in corporate jargon, full of phrases like paradigm shifting, synergizing human capital, and fostering inclusive excellence. My eyes glazed over just reading it. I remember Josiah just deleting the email without even opening it. That was his entire reaction. The first week she was there, you could feel the shift. It was subtle at first. New posters started appearing in the break rooms and hallways. Generic corporate art was replaced with brightly colored graphics and slogans. Diversity is our strength. Speak your truth. One of them just said empower in a giant curly font. It was a bit cringy, but whatever. Harmless office decoration. Then came the emails. A weekly inclusivity newsletter from Mina. Each one highlighted some new corporate policy or a link to an article about workplace issues. The tone was always cheerful and upbeat, but there was an undercurrent of accusation. They were always about problems that, funny enough, seemed to be caused exclusively by men. Topics like mansplaining, microaggressions, and unconscious bias. Most of us just set up an email rule to send them directly to the trash. The first real sign of trouble was the voluntary listening session. Mina invited all the female employees to a catered lunch to share their experiences in a safe space. None of the men were invited, obviously. The next day, the mood in the office was tense. The women who went to the meeting were whispering to each other, giving the men in the office weird looks. Nobody knew what was said, but it felt like we'd all been put on trial in absentia. The camaraderie between departments started to erode. Conversations by the coffee machine became more stilted, more formal. But still, our engineering corner remained an island of sanity. We had work to do. As long as the servers were running and the code was compiling, we figured we were safe. We were wrong. Mina's next big project was mandatory workshops. We all had to sign up for a 3-hour session on building a respectful workplace. We tried to get out of it. Josiah told our direct manager that we had a critical project deadline. The manager, a non-technical guy who was terrified of Mina, just shrugged and said it was non-negotiable. The workshop was a nightmare. We were all herded into a conference room. The presenter was an outside consultant, a woman who spoke with the infuriatingly calm and condescending tone of a kindergarten teacher. For 3 hours, she talked about privilege, power dynamics, and a whole list of behaviors we were supposed to avoid. The examples of problematic behavior were always a man doing something to a woman, never the other way around. A man interrupting a woman in a meeting, a man explaining something to a female colleague, a man making a joke that could be misinterpreted. I just sat in the back, trying to stay awake. Most of my team was doing the same. We were all mentally debugging code in our heads. The only engineer who seemed to be enjoying it was Max. Max was one of those guys, technically competent, but desperate for approval from authority figures. He was nodding along, asking insightful questions, trying to catch Mina's eye. She was there, in the corner, observing us, taking notes. It was incredibly uncomfortable. We felt like lab rats being studied. After the workshop, things got worse. Mina now had a whole new vocabulary of corporate sins to hunt for. An engineer trying to help a marketing person with a computer issue was mansplaining. A debate about the technical merits of two different software approaches was creating a hostile environment. She started inserting herself into our department meetings. She wouldn't say anything, just sit there with her laptop, typing, judging. The easy collaborative atmosphere of our team started to evaporate. People became hesitant to speak up, worried their words would be twisted and used against them. Emmanuel, our youngest guy, was especially spooked. He started second-guessing everything he said. He'd start to explain a technical concept, then stop himself, worried he was coming across as arrogant. It was painful to watch. His confidence was being systematically dismantled. We all felt the pressure. It was like a low-humming anxiety in the background of every workday. We were being treated like a problem that needed to be managed, a bunch of ticking time bombs that could go off at any second, with an inappropriate joke or a poorly phrased email. It was exhausting. The breaking point, the moment this whole Cold War went hot, came a few weeks later. Mina sent out a calendar invite. The subject was mandatory meeting, a pledge for progress. The list of attendees was interesting. It was every single man in the engineering department, and a few other men from other departments. Not a single woman was on the invite list. We were all talking about it on our private chat. What is this? Why only us? The day of the meeting, we all filed into the main conference room. Mina was standing at the front, next to a projector screen. She had that same strained, self-satisfied smile on her face. Max was there, of course. He sat right in the front row, like a teacher's pet. The rest of us huddled in the back, a nervous herd of zebras sensing a lion. Mina started her presentation. It was the usual corporate doublespeak. A lot of talk about accountability, proactive allyship, and dismantling systemic structures. She said that after her extensive listening sessions and observations, she had identified a core cultural challenge within the company. She didn't say it out loud, but the implication was clear. The challenge was us, the men. Then she revealed her grand solution, the Respect Pledge. She put a slide up on the screen, showing a document with a fancy header. She explained that as leaders and role models in the company, the men needed to set an example. We needed to formally commit to creating a safe and equitable environment. An HR assistant started walking around, handing out printed copies of the pledge. I took one. The paper felt heavy in my hand. I started reading it. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a pledge. It was a confession. It was a document filled with vague, unprovable, and unfalsifiable accusations. I acknowledge that I benefit from systemic male privilege, and I pledge to be mindful of the space I occupy. I commit to identifying and challenging toxic masculinity, both in myself and in my male colleagues. I understand that my intentions do not negate the impact of my actions, and I will accept feedback from my female colleagues without defensiveness. I pledge to be an active ally and to use my privilege to amplify the voices of women and marginalized groups in the workplace. It went on and on like this. It was a self-flagellation document, a written admission of guilt for crimes you didn't even know you were accused of. I looked around the room. The faces of my colleagues were grim. Emmanuel looked like he was going to be sick. Josiah was reading the document with a completely blank expression, his face like a granite statue. You could never tell what he was thinking. Mina finished her speech by saying that she expected us to all take some time to reflect on the pledge. We were required to sign it and return it to her office by the end of the week. She emphasized the word required. This wasn't a request. It was a condition of our continued employment. She asked if there were any questions. The room was dead silent. Nobody said a word. What could we say? To argue would be to prove her point. It would be seen as defensiveness, as a sign of the very toxicity the pledge was meant to cure. It was a perfectly designed trap. After a few moments of awkward silence, Mina just smiled and dismissed us. We all filed out of the room without a word. The spell of silence didn't break until we were back in our corner of the office. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone was just sitting at their desks, staring at the pledge. That piece of paper was a declaration of war. It told us exactly what the company, or at least its new HR queen, thought of us. We weren't valued colleagues. We weren't skilled professionals. We were a liability. A flawed class of people who needed to be re-educated and controlled. We were the problem. The rest of the day was a blur. Nobody got any real work done. At lunch, the whole engineering team, minus Max, instinctively gathered at our usual table in the cafeteria. For the first few minutes, nobody spoke. We just picked at our food. Emmanuel was the first one to crack. He put his fork down and just said, "I don't know what to do. I can't sign this. But I can't lose this job. I have student loans." His voice was shaking a little. A few other guys mumbled in agreement. They had mortgages, families. The company had us in a corner. Everyone looked at Josiah. He was the oldest, the most experienced, our unofficial tribal elder. He was slowly eating his salad, seeming completely unbothered. After a long moment, he finished chewing, put down his fork, and looked around the table. He spoke in his usual quiet, deliberate voice. "This isn't a pledge," he said. "It's a legal document. It's an admission of preemptive guilt." He picked up his copy of the pledge. "This clause here," he pointed, "I will accept feedback without defensiveness." What does that mean? It means if someone accuses you of something, you have already agreed that you are not allowed to defend yourself. Your only acceptable response is to agree and apologize, he continued. And this part, challenge toxic masculinity in my male colleagues. They are asking us to spy on each other, to report each other for vague, undefined thought crimes. He looked directly at Emmanuel. You sign this, and your career is at their mercy. Any disagreement, any workplace conflict, any personal dislike can be weaponized against you. They will pull out this paper that you signed and use it to prove you are a problem employee. It gives them a blank check to fire you for any reason they want. And you'll have no legal recourse because you've already signed your confession. A heavy silence fell over the table. He had put into words what we all felt instinctively. He had stripped away the fluffy corporate language and exposed the brutal mechanics of the trap. "So what do we do?" someone asked. "We can't just refuse. They'll fire us." I chimed in, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. "Well, clearly we're all just too toxic for this enlightened workplace. We're a danger to our female colleagues. The only responsible thing to do, as allies, is to remove ourselves from the equation." I meant it as a bitter joke. But then I saw the look on Josiah's face. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. He looked at me, then around the table at everyone else. "Oscar is right," he said, completely serious. "They've made it clear they don't trust us. They don't respect us. They see our entire demographic as a problem to be managed. A company that views its entire technical foundation as a threat is not a company with a future." He leaned forward. "We won't refuse to sign. We won't argue. We won't protest. Arguing is what they expect. It feeds their narrative. They want us to get angry and emotional. They want to prove themselves right. Instead," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "we will agree with them. We will agree that we are not a good fit for this new company culture they're building, and we will all quietly and professionally resign." The idea hung in the air. Resign. All of us. At first it seemed insane, unthinkable, but the more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. It wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of logic, an act of self-respect. It was the only move left on the chessboard. We were being told to bow. Instead, we would just walk away from the table. The fear on Emmanuel's face was slowly replaced by something else, a spark of defiance. You could see the gears turning in everyone's heads. The initial shock gave way to a dawning realization. We had power. We just hadn't realized it. The company needed us more than we needed them. We built this place. We maintained it. We held all the keys. Josiah laid out the plan. We do it all at once, this Friday, 5 o'clock. Each of us will walk up to Mina's office and hand in our 2 weeks' notice. No drama, no big speeches, just a simple, professional letter of resignation. "It has to be all of us," he stressed. "If it's just one or two, they'll be martyrs. If it's all of us, it's a message." The mood at the table had completely transformed. The despair was gone, replaced by a quiet, electric sense of purpose. We were no longer victims. We were actors. For the first time in months, we weren't reacting to Mina's crazy schemes. We were making our own plan. It felt good. It felt right. We spent the rest of the lunch hour working out the details. We agreed to not talk about it at the office. All communication would be on a private, encrypted channel. We would spend the next 2 days getting our affairs in order, updating our resumes, and preparing our resignation letters. Walking back to the office from that lunch, I felt lighter than I had in months. The oppressive weight of the corporate nonsense was gone. I had a choice. We all had a choice. The rest of the week was surreal. On the surface, everything was normal. We sat at our desks, typed at our keyboards, attended meetings. But underneath, there was a secret humming, a shared conspiracy. We'd catch each other's eye across the room and share a small, knowing nod. It was a strange kind of liberation. Mina would walk past our department with her smug smile, thinking she had us all backed into a corner. She had no idea she was a general, inspecting an army that had already decided to desert the night before the battle. She thought she was winning. She was about to find out that we weren't even playing her game. Friday afternoon arrived. It felt like the slowest day of my life. I spent the day documenting my work, cleaning up my code, leaving things in as professional a state as I could. It was a matter of pride. I wouldn't let them say we sabotaged anything. We would leave with our heads held high. At 4:45 p.m., a message appeared in our private group chat from Josiah. Time check. Everyone ready? One by one, the affirmations rolled in. Ready. Ready. Let's do this. I looked at my own resignation letter, printed and sitting in a plain white envelope on my desk. My heart was pounding, but it was a good kind of nervous, the kind you feel before the start of a race. At exactly 4:58 p.m., Josiah stood up from his desk. He didn't say a word. He just picked up his envelope and started walking towards the HR office. That was the signal. One by one, like a silent, disciplined platoon, the rest of us stood up. We left our workstations and formed a quiet procession down the hallway. We were about to call their bluff. The walk to Mina's office felt like a mile. Other employees in the open plan office saw us. A silent column of a dozen engineers walking with purpose. They stared, confused. You could see the questions on their faces. We ignored them. We had a single destination. Mina's office was at the end of the hall, a glass-walled cube that was supposed to represent transparency. She was at her desk, typing furiously on her laptop, probably composing another passive-aggressive newsletter. She didn't see us coming until Josiah was standing in her doorway. He didn't knock. He just stood there until she looked up, annoyed at the interruption. Her annoyance turned to confusion when she saw the rest of us lined up behind him. Josiah stepped forward, placed his white envelope on the center of her desk, and said nothing. He then turned and walked away. I was next. I stepped in, placed my envelope next to his. Our eyes met for a second. Her expression was a mixture of shock and contempt. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew it was an act of defiance. I didn't say a word. I just turned and followed Josiah. One by one, my colleagues did the same. It was a silent, solemn ritual. Each envelope landing on her desk was like a drumbeat marking the end of an era. By the time the fourth or fifth person had done it, the color was draining from her face. Her smug corporate mask was cracking. The final man in our line was Emmanuel. He was nervous, but he did it. He placed his letter on the growing pile, gave her a quick, almost apologetic glance, and then practically fled. As we walked away, I glanced back. Mina was just staring at the pile of envelopes on her desk. She was completely frozen. Standing awkwardly near her door was Max. He was holding his signed pledge. He had clearly come to proudly present his loyalty oath, only to walk into the middle of a mass resignation. The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated panic. He looked from the pile of envelopes to our retreating backs. He was alone. He had chosen his side, and he had chosen poorly. We got back to our desks and started packing up our personal items. The 2-week countdown had begun. A few minutes later, we saw a blur of motion. It was Mina, storming out of her office and speed-walking towards the CEO's suite. She was clutching the envelopes in her hand. We all knew what was happening. She was going to spin the narrative. About 20 minutes later, an email landed in our inboxes. It was from the CEO. It was a short, generic message accepting our resignations. It thanked us for our service and wished us well in our future endeavors. That was it. No questions. No attempt to talk to us. Mina had done her job well. She had convinced him that this was a good thing. We later heard through the office grapevine what her story was. She had framed it as a necessary cultural cleansing. She told the CEO that the engineers who resigned were remnants of a toxic, outdated culture who were resistant to progress. She claimed their refusal to sign the pledge was proof that they were the very problem she was hired to solve. She promised the CEO that she could replace us with a new, more diverse and forward-thinking team in no time. A team that would be cheaper and more aligned with her corporate vision. The CEO, a man who understood balance sheets but not source code, believed her. He saw it as a cost-saving opportunity and a PR win. He had just signed the death warrant of his own company. The next 2 weeks were the strangest I have ever spent in a workplace. The atmosphere was not hostile or angry. It was surgically precise and professionally cold. We performed our duties to the exact letter of our job descriptions. We fulfilled our assigned tasks, closed our open tickets, and documented our work. But we did nothing more. The tribal knowledge, the thousands of little things you learn over years of working on a complex system, was not part of the official documentation. The weird server quirk that required a specific reboot sequence, the undocumented API dependency that would break everything if you updated the wrong library, the customer-specific hotfix that was just a script on Josiah's local machine. All of that information, the connective tissue that kept the company's tech alive, was staying with us. We weren't hiding it. We just weren't offering it. No one asked. Mina, meanwhile, was in a frenzy of activity. She was constantly on the phone with recruiters, posting job openings on every platform imaginable. The job descriptions she wrote were hilarious. They were less about technical skills and more about ideological purity. Must be passionate about social justice. Experience in dismantling patriarchal structures is a plus. Must demonstrate a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The few candidates who did come in for interviews were a disaster. We would see them being led to the conference room by Mina. Good. Experienced engineers would walk out of the interview shaking their heads after 20 minutes. The only ones who seemed to get a positive response from her were fresh-faced juniors with the right buzzwords on their resumes or activists who knew how to speak her language. The rest of the office was in a state of quiet panic. The non-technical staff were starting to realize that the entire foundation of the company was about to walk out the door. They would approach us with worried looks, asking if we were really leaving. We would just nod politely. Max was having the worst time of all. He was now the sole remaining member of the engineering department. Mina had promoted him to interim team lead as a reward for his loyalty. His reward was a poisoned chalice. He was now responsible for a complex web of systems he barely understood. The first crack appeared a week before our departure. A minor, non-critical internal reporting tool went down. In the past, it was a 5-minute fix. I knew exactly which service needed a kick, but it wasn't my job anymore. The task was assigned to Max. We watched him struggle with it for an entire day. He was sweating, frantically typing commands, rebooting the wrong things. He finally broke and came over to Josiah's desk. "Hey," he mumbled, "I can't get the reporting server back online. Do you know what's wrong with it?" Josiah looked up from his monitor, his face completely neutral. "I have already completed all my assigned tasks for the day," he said calmly. "All standard operating procedures for that server are located in the documentation repository. I suggest you consult it." Max's face fell. He knew, as we all did, that the documentation was years out of date. He slunk back to his desk, defeated. The reporting tool stayed down for the rest of the week. It was a small thing, but it was a sign of things to come, a preview of the chaos that was about to be unleashed. Our last day was a Friday. The mood was almost festive. We had all spent the past 2 weeks applying for new jobs, and the market for experienced engineers was hot. Most of us already had multiple offers, better pay, better companies. We spent the morning deleting personal files from our computers and saying quiet goodbyes to the few people in other departments we actually liked. We were officially done at 5 p.m. At 3:30 p.m., the alarms started, not fire alarms, system failure alarms. A series of high-pitched piercing beeps from the server monitoring dashboards. Red lights started flashing across the boards. I looked over at the main status screen. My stomach dropped. It was the core database cluster. A catastrophic failure. This wasn't a minor reporting tool. This was the heart of the entire company. The customer database, the product inventory, the payment processing system, all of it was down. The website was throwing errors. The sales team couldn't process orders. The entire company had just ground to a halt. Within seconds, the office erupted into chaos. Phones started ringing off the hook. People were shouting. Max was staring at the red lights with his mouth open, a picture of absolute terror. He was completely and utterly out of his depth. The CEO came sprinting out of his office, his face pale. He saw the dashboards, saw Max frozen in panic, and then he saw us. We were all standing by our desks, calmly putting our jackets on and boxing up the last of our personal belongings. He ran over to us, his usual corporate composure completely gone. "What's happening?" he yelled. "You have to fix this." Josiah looked at his watch. "It appears to be a cascading replication failure in the primary database cluster," he said, his voice as calm as if he were describing the weather. "Well, fix it," the CEO screamed, his voice cracking. "I don't care what it takes. Fix it now." He looked around at all of us, his eyes wild with desperation. "I'll double your salaries, triple them. Just make it stop." There was a long, painful silence. We all just looked at him. Josiah was the one who finally spoke. "Our employment with this company concludes in approximately 7 minutes, he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. As of 5 p.m., we will no longer be authorized to access company systems. To do so would be a security violation. I'm afraid we can't help you." He picked up his box of personal items. "It has been a pleasure working with you. We wish you the best of luck in finding a solution." He turned and started walking towards the exit. It was like a spell being broken. The rest of us picked up our boxes and followed him. We walked in a silent line, right through the middle of the pandemonium. We walked past the frantic salespeople, the panicked marketing team, and the terrified CEO. As I passed Mina's office, I glanced inside. She was standing by her window, staring out at the chaos, her face ashen. She looked lost. A queen whose kingdom had just crumbled into dust around her. We didn't look back. We walked out the front doors, into the late afternoon sun, and we were free. We heard later what happened. The system was down for 4 full days. They had to hire an emergency team of outside consultants at an astronomical hourly rate to even begin to untangle the mess. They lost their biggest client. The financial damage was in the millions. The story leaked. An anonymous post on Glassdoor described the respect pledge in glorious detail. It got picked up by tech blogs. The company became a laughingstock, a cautionary tale of what happens when ideology replaces competence. Mina was fired, not with a severance package, but unceremoniously escorted out of the building by security. The CEO was forced to step down by the board a few months later. As for us, the day after we left, Josiah called us all. He suggested that since we were all now unemployed and had a unique set of skills, we should just keep working together. 6 of us, including me and Emmanuel, pooled our resources and started our own software consulting firm. We were our own bosses. No HR, no mandatory workshops, no pledges. Just a group of professionals, respected for our skills and judged by the quality of our work. Business is booming. We have a waiting list of clients. A few nights ago, out of curiosity, I looked up Mina on LinkedIn. She's reinvented herself. Her new title is Freelance Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategy Consultant. Her profile is full of posts about the importance of creating safe spaces and dismantling oppressive systems in the workplace. I just smiled and closed the browser tab. Some people never learn. They just find a new audience for their sermons after they've burned the last church to the ground.